And we welcome you guys to another episode of Quarantine Chats. Came up with a new show name temporarily. We're on the second week of our quarantine here in California. I'm joined here by special guest Sammy Block. He is host of Buzzer Beaters. I can't believe it's been this long without hosting an episode together, Sam.
I know. We got to get that going. I'm happy we're doing quarantine chats tonight. I'm happy to be here in New Jersey right now. Senior at Ohio State, ESPN next year, Buzzer Beaters host, like you said. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, I heard about that ESPN gig, man. Congrats. All the best to you. As you guys know, if you guys don't know who Sam is already, I've been sharing his podcast all over the place on Facebook. He's the guy you always see me sharing his videos. So happy to have you on here.
Thank you. I'm really excited to talk some sports.
I can't believe we got the GOAT on, man.
The GOAT,
you guys
Sam
are great.
Block.
Thank you.
How you doing over there, Ryan? Ryan's joined me here from Fan Response.
Oh, same as always. Just staring at the walls in my house. About all any of us can do at this stage.
Yeah, but we got quarantine chats running. We got a whole lot of NFL talk for you guys. Melvin Gordon to the Broncos. And then we're going to talk about some college football as well. As you know, Trey Sermon managed to transfer to Ohio State via the transfer portal. So got a whole bunch of football to talk with you guys. Thank God free agency was not postponed during this quarantine because I don't know what we'd be talking about. So anyway, before we jump into Sam and Isaiah's takes, Ryan and I were live yesterday at Fan Response. So just want to give you a quick summary of what we thought about the Melvin Gordon deal to the Broncos. He signs 2 years, $16 million to the Broncos. I thought it was, an okay deal for the situation. They have to compete with the Chiefs over there in their division. It's really tough. And I know they could have spent the money better elsewhere, but given the name Melvin Gordon and the upside behind the deal, if you weren't 100% sure with Philip Lindsay being your back moving forward, I thought it was an okay deal to bring some star power to the team to compete with really the Chiefs and the Raiders offensively. Brian, why don't you go over your take?
All right. In summary, I have my complaints about Melvin Gordon. I view him as a little inconsistent year to year. But regardless of all that, he's still a very talented back, still relatively young. So I like let me say this. The deal he got, he is especially worthy of it. 2 years, $16 million, about 13.5 guaranteed. He's worthy of that deal, but I don't like that deal coming from the Broncos. I just think the Broncos could have spent that money elsewhere, and they already have two really good running backs on the roster in Freeman and Philip Lindsay. So I just think that's a little too much money to spend on a position that you didn't really need to upgrade, at least in my opinion.
And do you believe that Philip Lindsay would be a good long-term situation for the Broncos?
I think Philip Lindsay would be a fantastic RB1 on any team. If the Browns didn't have Nick Chubb or Kareem Hunt, I would gladly take Lindsay as my running back number one.
Agreed there. Sam, what were your thoughts on that move?
I didn't love the move too much because he's the sixth highest paid running back in the NFL, which I don't mind. He's around that area in terms of how good he is compared to his counterparts. I do think he's been pretty consistent. He's averaged about 220 carries for about 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. He catches about 50 passes for 500 yards and 4 touchdowns a season. Last year, he wasn't great. His first season, he was okay. He didn't have any rushing touchdowns. But overall, in his 5-year career, he's been pretty solid. This year, though, the Chargers weren't great as a team. He was decent, and Austin Eckler was maybe even more productive. I like Melvin Gordon I don't think he's going anywhere in terms of getting any better. He's about to turn 27. Running back shelf lives are not long. The Broncos needed to do something, though. Since 2015, when they made the Super Bowl, 4 straight seasons, no playoffs whatsoever.
Yeah, so, it was more of just a home run move to get a big name in there. So that's why I didn't really hate the move too much. Ryan, you mentioned that you really think the money could have been spent somewhere else. Where do you think this money could have been spent better?
If the Broncos intent was to upgrade the running game, I think that money could have been better spent to go and sign maybe like two backups or a high premium backup or a spot starter with that $8 million. Really, I think improving on that offensive line would have gone a lot further to develop in the run game than getting a fairly good running back when you already had pretty good running backs on the roster before this deal got signed.
Yeah, and then the Chargers, they don't lose out on too much because, as we mentioned, they have Austin Eckler and they also have Justin Jackson as their running backs, who both did pretty solid uh, with Melvin Gordon off that roster.
Well, the Chargers aren't going anywhere if they don't sign a quarterback. They're not going to start Justin Herbert from day one if they go and get him or two or one of those guys. They're obviously not getting Joe Burrow. So Tyrod Taylor's, I know he took the, Bills to the playoffs and he's had some good seasons, but he's a backup for a reason. He's about the 30th best quarterback in the NFL right now. They're not going anywhere if they don't upgrade at the quarterback position. So I don't care if you have Austin Eckler. Not enough.
And I have my take on – go ahead, Ryan.
I would argue that if the team's like offensive line gets upgraded, that Tyrod Taylor can lead this team to a better record than Phillip Rivers did last year with a bad offensive line. I am really high on Tyrod Taylor. I personally think he's a better quarterback than, say, a Teddy Bridgewater, and Teddy Bridgewater just got a 3-year, $63 million deal. So I view Tyrod Taylor fairly high in comparison to, I guess, the majority of sports fans out there.
I'm going to have to disagree there a little bit. I think Tyrod Taylor and Bridgewater are certainly very similar quarterbacks to each other. I call them like another version of Alex Smith. But I'm going to give the edge a little bit to Bridgewater just because of experience, starting with the Vikings and winning there, and with the Saints. Just experience with multitude offensive systems and having to actually been in a playoff scenario with the Vikings early on in his career. So I think he's got a little bit better of leadership and experience than Taylor. But I have my own take on the AFC West, and I really feel like all the teams in the AFC West are in a wait-and-see mode. They want to go out there and sign who they best can sign, given, value money. They're not really trying to sign anyone to like a $20 million deal or anything. They're not trying to go after the biggest free agent stars because they understand what they're up against, which is the Chiefs. And the Chiefs are an all-time great team right now with an all-time great quarterback. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. I really, truly believe that the AFC West is this generation's AFC East. It really is the new AFC East. These teams, no matter what they do, the core is they cannot figure out quarterback to the extent that the Chiefs can. They can't get a Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady anytime soon. And as long as that's a constant, the Chiefs will consistently dominate this division. So they're just kind of going out there and testing the water. I would love to hear Isaiah's thoughts on the moves, though.
Yeah, so before I get into the Melvin Gordon signing, I just want to give some praise to John Elway. People have been hating on John Elway for the past couple of years for making some moves that for the move that he did make, which was trading for Joe Flacco, and the moves that he didn't make, which was not hiring Kyle Shanahan to be the head coach in 2017 when Gary Kubiak retired, and instead hiring Vance Joseph. But I got to tell you, I really do love what the Denver Broncos are doing this offseason. They lost their starting center and their cornerback this offseason, and then they went out and replaced those two guys with one of the top centers on the market in Graham Glasgow, and then they traded a 4th-round pick for one of the top corners in all of football, in A.J. Boye, and then they signed the best punter and best backup quarterback on the market in Sam Martin and Jeff Driscoll. So kudos to you, John Elway. Keep it up. As far as the Melvin Gordon signing is concerned, I really like it because it gives the Broncos offense another weapon. It helps alleviate some of the load off of Drew Lock's shoulders. And the Broncos, let's face it, they need to score touchdowns. Their offense has been one of the most horrible offenses in all of football for the past I think like 2-3 years. They need to score touchdowns to keep pace with the Kansas City Chiefs. And Melvin Gordon with Phillip Lindsay, I think that's one of the top 5 running back 1-2 punches in our league.
Yeah, I agree with that. I can see how this can maybe alleviate some of the offensive concerns for Drew Lock and just the overall Broncos system. But I don't really see Drew Lock as the long-term answer here. I've seen him not be able to make the same throws as, necessarily a star out there. So overall, I just don't think this really shifts the parameters of the AFC West or really changes the landscape.
Wait, let me ask you guys a question. So with all the moves that the Broncos have made, like bringing in Jarrell Casey from the Titans, signing Jeff Driscoll, trading for AJ Boye, and now signing Melvin Gordon, do you guys think that Vic Fangio is on the hot seat now?
Yeah, I think Vic Fangio was on the hot seat last year, even though it was his first season. I don't think Elway is going to be that patient. He wants to win. He doesn't want to be criticized. If they don't win this year, I think Fangio will be fired.
Yeah, completely agree with that, Sam. Let's move on to our next
same here.
topic. Yeah, let's move on to our next topic here, which is Emmanuel Sanders to the Saints. Man, the NFC South just keeps getting a whole lot hotter. First, we had Tom Brady to the Buccaneers. Now you add Emmanuel Sanders to the Saints. Oh, and by the way, Gurley to the Falcons as well. So I want to go over this move really quickly. I just think that the Saints right now have the best receiving core in the NFL, and they added to it with Emmanuel Sanders, a guy who's now had a lot of playoff experience, a lot of experience in terms of making championship runs out there, Super Bowl runs. I love the move. Sam, you're shaking your head. I want to hear.
No,
what
I
you
love the
gotta
move too. I don't know about that best receiving core in the NFL thing. Their receiving core is weak. That's why I like the move. Michael Thomas is a dog. Nobody's going to argue with that. But besides that, they've had no number 2. Ted Ginn's a great player. I love him. Great NFL career. He's not a number 2. Traquan Smith, yeah, there's nobody. There's nobody. Look at the depth chart. It's a laughingstock. Alvin Kamara could catch the ball, but he's not a wide receiver. Jared Cook, yeah, he's a tight end though. So wide receiver, they needed an upgrade. This is a great move. He has 8,000 career receiving yards. He has 600 career receptions, over 40 career touchdowns. In 2014, 15, and 16, when Peyton Manning was there and he was in Denver, he had 1,000 yards a season, basically. So he hasn't done that since. But last year with the Niners, he played well until they didn't really end up using him down the stretch when they were just going to Deebo Samuel. But the Saints are 26-6 over the past 2 seasons in the regular season, and they have not gotten the job done in the playoffs. Now Tom Brady joins the division. The Falcons are going to be better, and then the Panthers, who knows? But still, they got to stay on top of their game. Drew Brees doesn't have much time left. I like this move a lot, and I think the Saints are, the favorite to get to the Super Bowl in the NFC.
And if you thought the Saints were dangerous or maybe even the favorites in the NFC before, it just got a whole lot harder for not just the NFC South, but all the other NFC teams out there. I'm looking at your Niners and Rams there, Isaiah, and also those rival Seahawks. It's going to be tough for them coming out of the NFC now. Ryan, what were your thoughts on this move? Hold on, while we got Ryan on
Well,
hold
first
there,
off, I also wanted to address your comment about the Saints and
So it sounds like we got Ryan on hold here. Isaiah, I wanted to know your thoughts about the Saints landing Emmanuel Sanders on their team.
All I gotta say is the rich gets richer. The Saints were already a very potent offensive team, and they just got even better with this Emmanuel Sanders signing. Sam is right. The Saints haven't really had a true number 2 receiver, and now they get that in Emmanuel Sanders, and his contract is not that bad. 2 years, 16 mil, $8 million per year. That's a really good contract. And let me tell you, I love the arms race that is going on in the NFC South. Right now, you've got Brady, Breeze, Ryan as your quarterbacks. And then you've got Gurley, Kamara, and Mike Evans, Emmanuel Sanders, Michael Thomas, Julio Jones. And not to mention, you've got 2 of the best offensive head coaches.
What about Christian McCaffrey?
Oh, Christian McCaffrey too. Yeah, I forgot about him. two of the best head coaches in our game in Bruce Arians and Sean Payton, and you add to that with two top coaches from college football this past season in Matt Rule and Joe Brady. Man, the NFC South is going to be fun to watch this season. It's going to be a bloodbath. I can't wait to see how that shakes out.
Yeah, it's going to be a whole lot of high intensity action here. You got four quarterbacks, four franchise quarterbacks in that division. It's going to be high action, high octane scoring. But I want to ask you guys, with this move here, Emmanuel Sanders to the Saints, Todd Gurley to the Falcons, do you believe that the NFC South is now the most competitive division in the NFL, or would you put that as the NFC West?
I would still go with the West. I think the South is really competitive and really good. The Buccaneers need to be great, and obviously they go from Winston to Brady. But don't forget, Winston had over 30 touchdowns, threw for like 9 billion yards, and the Mike Evans and Chris Godwin had huge years. I think the Bucs obviously get better here. Brady's not going to throw 30 interceptions. But if they can get better, then it becomes interesting. Carolina, I still don't love as a football team. Atlanta's up and down every year. We'll see what they do. Saints and Bucs, very intriguing. The other two teams, we'll see. But the West, you have the Rams, who I think are going to – they made a lot of weird moves. They're getting rid of a lot of their talent, but they still, have a good team. They got a lot of receiving weapons. I don't know. I liked them more before this offseason. Then you still got Seattle, great every year, and you still have the Niners. Clearly going to be a top team for a long, long time, even though they just lost DeForest Buckner to the Colts. But the Cardinals, too. Kyler's going to get better, and guess who they just picked up? DeAndre Hopkins, one of the best, if not the best, wide receiver in the NFL. So the Cardinals are no slouch either. 5-11 last year. They could be better this year. I think the NFC West is still a better division, but it's very close.
It's very, very close, Sam, as you mentioned. And I think that right now the Buccaneers still have a little bit of deficiencies to work through. Their defense was not the best. I know Jameis Winston threw 30 interceptions, but that defense still allowed teams like the Rams to throw 40 points on them. And we're just going to have to see. With Brady in there, I think they're going to eliminate the turnovers and stuff. But also, like you said in your previous episodes, we don't really see Brady as a guy who's just going to throw it down the field over and over again and really go for those home run plays. So that'll limit their offense a little bit too. Jameis was not as big of a slouch as people think. He passed for over 5,000 yards. And I'm going to still have to stick with the West because we saw the Rams in the Super Bowl just 2 seasons ago, less than 2 seasons ago, February 2019. We saw the Niners in the Super Bowl this year. Obviously, Seattle's such a big threat. And now with all the weapons that the Cardinals got, they freaking fleeced DeAndre Hopkins off the Texans. I just think Kyler Murray's going to continue to get better and better, and so is Mel Kiper. It's a very, very explosive division.
Here's my thing, too. If I would rank the teams 1 through 8, I'd probably have Saints, 49ers, Seahawks, Bucks, Rams, Falcons, Cardinals, Panthers. So the reason why I say West is because if you look at it, 3 of my top 5 are NFC West, which means 2 of my bottom 3 are from the NFC South. So I think it's close. But again, I'd lean West.
How about you, Isaiah? You are a fan of 2 teams in the NFC West, the Rams and the Niners. Do you think this move propels the NFC South over the NFC West, along with that Todd Gurley to the Falcons move?
I would still give the edge to the NFC West because I feel like in the NFC West, all 4 teams, I think, have a legit shot of winning that division. You've got the Rams with McVay, with Goff. They just went to the Super Bowl like 2 years ago. The Niners, obviously, they were super dominant last season. They've got a great defense, great offense, great play caller in Kyle Shanahan. Arizona, their offense was pretty good last season. It got even better with the addition of DeAndre Hopkins. They just got to work on that defense. And Seattle, Seattle's always been doing what Seattle does. And in the NFC South, I really think right now it's a battle between the Saints and the Bucks. The Panthers are rebuilding with Matt Rule. They just lost a lot of players. The Falcons, I don't really know what to think of them because, they've had 3 bad years after they went to the Super Bowl. So I'm going to go with the NFC West because of the 4 teams, each has a legit shot to win the division.
I think you can make the argument, though, that the AFC North, they may be in that conversation too. Browns should be great. We'll see what ends up happening. Ravens, obviously, we know what they are. Pittsburgh, with Big Ben coming back, we know what they are. And then Cincinnati, if they get Joe Burrow, who knows how good they could be. So I think that division's pretty competitive as well.
But I look at the NFC West as a more polished AFC North here because you have the young quarterback in Kyler Murray versus Joe Burrow. I would still take Kyler Murray with Mel Kiper's system and his offensive pieces along with the extra year of experience over the Joe Burrow-led Bengals.
You talking about Cliff Kingsbury?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, you're good.
Cliff Kingsbury. Do we still got you there, Ryan?
Yes, and I would agree with you guys and say that the NFC West is the more competitive division. In the NFC West, I could see each of those teams being able to beat each other. So I could see a scenario where 2 or 3 of the teams goes 3-3 in the division. But then when I look to the NFC South, I think Atlanta, Tampa, and the New Orleans Saints will be good. But I could honestly see the Carolina Panthers going 0-6 in the division and having like a 3-13 or 4-12 or 5-11 record. So I have to say NFC West because Arizona Cardinals, they were figuring out towards the end of the year. Then you just add Hopkins to that. So I think they'll be a good team. So that's 4 good teams in the NFC West, while there's only 3 good teams in the NFC South. Also, I'd probably say the NFC North will be more competitive than the NFC South. You have Green Bay and the Vikings. They'll be competitive as always. I think the Bears have to improve. I didn't like some of the signings they made, but they're still will show improvements. I just think those deals will bite them down the line. But Bears will improve. And I think the Lions are a team to watch from going 3-12-1 to like a 9-7 or a 10-6. Now, I don't like their head coach. There's been reports coming out, especially from Slay when he was traded away, that shows he may not be the best leader. But he comes from the Bill Belichick school of thought, so I have to imagine he's still a decent coach. And I just see the Detroit Lions with a healthy Matthew Stafford, who we said on Fan Response, I view as a top 5 quarterback. So if they can just get back and get healthy, they could be a good team as well. So, yeah, I'd say the NFC North is more competitive than the NFC South.
I got to jump in. Matt Stafford is nowhere near a top 5 quarterback. He's probably around 13 to 20 in that. He is nowhere near top 5. First of all. Also, second of all, him staying healthy, that's a huge if with Matt Stafford. Also, the Lions aren't going to sniff 10-6. And I also don't love the Bears getting any better. I think Trubisky and Foles are a mess waiting to happen, and Chicago doesn't have much to work with. They lost Jordan Howard. They don't have that good of a roster, not many weapons. Their defense is good, obviously, but they're not going to return to the 2 years ago form. So I think Green Bay is really solid. They're not going to be as good as they were last year, though. They're not going 13-3. Vikings are good. They just lost Stephon Diggs, though. Who knows if Dalvin Cook's going to stay healthy again? So I don't think so. I think the South is pretty compelling with the Saints and Tom Brady joining the Buccaneers.
I'd agree that the offense of the Bears might be a mess, given that they added Nick Foles, which I don't think will help very much because I still think they'll be stubborn enough to stick with Trubisky no matter how bad he plays.
Doesn't matter. If they go to Nick Foles, it would still be silly. Nick Foles is a backup quarterback. I have said this for a long time. Those Super Bowls were not because of him.
But a backup quarterback that can win the last 3 games of a year. You saw what he did just 2 years ago with the Philadelphia Eagles. He got them to the playoffs, and they were driving to beat the Saints before Alshon Jeffrey let the ball slip through his hands and let it get picked off. So in the right system, Nick Foles can be a good quarterback, and he's reuniting with his quarterback coach in
Yeah, all good points there. The
Chicago, the
NFC.
field.
Yeah, all good points there. The NFC is wide open as always. It's always the craziest conference. I mean, 2 years ago, 2 seasons ago, we had the Eagles, and then we had the Rams win the NFC, and then we had the Niners. These were all teams that at the start of their seasons, we were like, wait a minute, like they're not really true Super Bowl contenders
Also,
or anything. You know, they get into the playoffs, that might be impressive or something, but we're not expecting any Super Bowl run from them by any means. So the NFC is always wildly competitive. We'll see like how everything turns out as the season progresses.
oh, I have to add one more thing. I know Matt Stafford being healthy, that is a huge question mark. But if you look at his stats last year for the first half of the year, he was playing like a top 5 quarterback. I think he was on pace for like 30 plus touchdowns with like less than 10 interceptions and coming close to 5,000 yards. If you take his first half and expand it over a whole season, I know he's gotten a bad rep, but I I don't know. I just really like what he could do if given a full year. And I think to put him in the 20 to 12 range or 20 to 13 range is especially harsh. He's had some pretty productive years. Now, he may have been a little overrated early on in his career with the help of Calvin Johnson, but he's really matured into a efficient quarterback. And yeah, I just see him potentially being able to lead a playoff team and lead a playoff team deep into the playoffs if given the right roster.
Yeah. Any further thoughts on this before we move to college football? All right, well, let's jump into college football here. Ohio State ends up landing Trey Sermon. For those guys who see my background here, this is actually a background of Ohio State beating Penn State back in the fall of 2018. It was an epic game. Me and Sam were over there at B-Dubs, Columbus, watching the away game. We went down 26-13 to Trace McSorley. We were down, but we were not out. Come back on Penn State. It just seems like every year we pull something great against Penn State. We put up our best performance in the fourth quarter. We close it out, end up winning by 1 point. And for all of you guys who know those videos from Sam a couple years ago, he jumped on top of my camera. It was all, let's go, let's go. Most of those videos were you whispered yelling, but this one you were screaming.
Absolutely. Good times. Always loved the Buckeyes beating up on the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, and I think with this move right here, Ohio State landing Trey Sermon, that the dominance in the Big Ten will continue for Ohio State. This is now Justin Fields' second year with the Buckeyes. Trey Sermon's coming in. Master Teague actually silently had a very, very good year filling in as a backup role under Dobbins last year. I thought he showed a lot of promise. He really kind of reminded me of like a mini Dobbins, maybe a mixture between Dobbins and Weber, where he's got some of that power running ability and that craftiness, ability to catch the ball out of the backfield, really maneuver his way around defenders. Trey Sermon was one guy that Oklahoma was really missing in the playoffs and contributed to that blowout against LSU in the playoffs. So I think this is a great move. And to add on to this, I think the whole transfer portal, while not a very good thing for college football, is turning out to be such a great thing for the top teams within college football. We saw it with Ohio State. Ohio State let Joe Burrow slip through their hands because they had Haskins, who worked better for their system in that time. And they also had Barrett before Haskins, right? They were left with Tate Martell. All of a sudden, with the new transfer portal, Justin Fields gets a clean slate at Ohio State. Ohio State remains the dominant force of the Big Ten. They beat up on Penn State again. They beat up on Michigan again, beat up on Wisconsin again. Oklahoma was also another team that should have been left for dead. Kyler Murray moving on to first it was baseball, but then he ultimately chose the NFL. Then they get Jalen Hurts from Alabama, the backup, who actually took them to the national title a couple years ago, and he gets them to the playoffs. It's very interesting now. College football is becoming a lot more top-heavy. I don't think this new transfer system is a very great thing college football in general for the parity of it all, like being able to have other teams come out and make championship runs. But I'm not complaining because I'm an Ohio State fan and I love seeing my Buckeyes dominate. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good for college football, even for parity. A team like LSU isn't touching the national title if they don't get Joe Burrow. And as much as you think like, oh, well, the top teams are getting these guys, well, the backups from the top teams are going to other really good programs. Like Ohio State would have had all of them. They would have had Dwayne Haskins and Joe Burrow. Instead, Joe Burrow left because he wasn't getting an opportunity at Ohio State. Alabama would have had all of them. They would have had Tua and they would have had Jalen Hurts. But because Jalen Hurts wasn't getting an opportunity, he went to Oklahoma. So I get what you're saying. They're going to top teams anyway, but at least they're going to other programs, and you're not having 5-6 talented quarterbacks sitting on one team. They're going to other teams. Also, Trey Sermon, great pickup. J.K. Dobbins going to the draft. Master Teague with a little bit of an injury. But Trey Sermon, he's had a lot of success. 2 years in a row, he had 744 yards and 947 yards with 5 and 13 touchdowns. He's not much of a receiving back, but that's okay. The Buckeyes have a lot that they could do in that area. Listen, he's 6 foot. He's 221. He's a bull of a running back. He runs through people. Ohio State has some depth issues with J.K. Dobbins leaving. They have guys, Marcus Crowley, Steele Chambers. Again, we talked about Master Teague, but he's injured. Mayan Williams, he's going to probably redshirt his freshman year. They have talent, but bringing in a guy like Trey Sermon, who's proven, he's going to be a really big pickup for the Buckeyes. He looks like a linebacker out there.
Yeah, how do you think Ohio State does this season, Sam?
Oh, I think they're going to dominate as usual. Justin Fields coming back is huge. Obviously, losing Chase Young is big, but they got Zach Harrison coming right in. They lose Joey Bosa, they go to Nick Bosa. They lose Nick Bosa, they go to Chase Young. They lose Chase Young, Zach Harrison's an absolute animal on the defensive line. Then you got all that talent in the secondary. I understand Jeff Okudah left, but Sean Wade coming back is huge. And then the wide receiver position is just ridiculous. They're just recruiting left and right, the top guys in the nation. Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Julian Fleming, they're going to be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Isaiah, you are a strong advocate of Jim Harbaugh. He hasn't been able to get it done against Ohio State. You're always the number one hater of Ohio State. You're always picking against them. Ohio State gets stronger with Trey Sermon here. They keep Justin Fields. What's your reaction to this move right here?
Well, I know you guys can't see me right now, but I'll describe what's going on. I'm like, I have my head down, and inside I'm like silently weeping. That's how bad it is right now. But my reaction is like, the rich just gets richer, you know? Like Ohio State went undefeated last year. They were dominating most of their games, and they've got another 5-star recruiting class coming in. They've got a lot of good players coming back, and now they add Trey Sermon. It's like the Warriors adding Kevin Durant, man. It's like, wow, the rich just gets richer. So
OH, baby.
I got nothing to say. It's just the rich gets richer. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, and Sam brought up a great point about the transfer system. It may seem like on paper, and I have to reevaluate this myself a little, that the top teams are just going to continue to get richer. But to Sam's point, Joe Burrow did transfer to LSU, brought them to new heights, beat out teams like Auburn, Alabama, and ultimately Clemson. They won the national title. That might have not happened with the old way of transferring. And I'm excited for this football season, Sam. I just think that Ohio State, as it is, they just continue to grow stronger because they're not only just recruiting some of the best players from Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan, and across the nation now, Texas included. Now they're getting transfer students and transfer athletes to join the program. It is really the rich get richer, and I think we could see Ohio State potentially being that next Clemson or Alabama. I have them winning the national title this upcoming season.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be tough. Them and Clemson most likely again. Trevor Lawrence is going to be really, really good again, but I think Ohio State has a clear chance. Ryan Day is a motivator and competitive guy, and he's going to be great.
And he's going to be so upset off that loss. Honestly, I think Clemson is losing their luster a little bit over the past couple of years. I've seen them struggle in the ACC year after year after year, but after watching this playoffs,
they win every game though. I
know.
Clemson's a powerhouse. Dabo Swinney's not going anywhere.
All right. Well, we'll see where Clemson heads. Ryan, what are your thoughts on this move and outlook for Ohio State coming into this season?
I got a few things to respond to before I can get to my main point. First of all, as Sam said, the wide receiver recruiting that Ohio State had done. Shout out to Brian Hartline, former Browns wide receiver, best wide receiver recruiter and wide receiver coach in the country. So just an amazing addition by the Buckeyes and on Ryan Day's staff. Also, the point about Michigan, I've noticed Michigan is being very thoughtful and very caring. They are practicing social distancing away from recruits. They haven't landed a top recruit in like the ESPN top like 300 in like 10 months. Like Michigan is not doing well right now, like at all. So I have Ohio State beating them probably by like 21 this time around. But yeah, the move itself, I really love it. I mean, Master Teague went down with an injury. We don't know how serious it is, but rumors are it's an Achilles injury, and that's nothing to mess with. So there's rumors that he could be out the majority, if not all, of the season. So while Ohio State does have talent at the running back spot in Steel Chambers, these are unproven guys. What Trey Sermon brings to the Buckeyes is a running back with experience, a running back that has shown the ability to really perform well on the football field. He averaged like 6.1 yards a carry in his time in Oklahoma. As Sam said, just a beast of a running back. So just the experience and leadership he can bring to that position group could be the difference between going 10-2 and missing the playoffs to 11-1 to 12-0 and making the playoffs if Master Teague is healthy. So I just really, really, really love this move. And also, since we're talking about Ohio State transfers, shout out to Ohio State basketball, landed the best graduate transfer on the market, and that would be Seth
Absolutely.
from, I believe, Harvard's one of the Ivy League teams, but he was the Ivy League Player of the Year back in 2017, 2018. So just a huge addition to Ohio State basketball as well.
Yeah, definitely. All great points there. Ryan, will you put Ohio State up there? Do you have them as your champion for the 2020 to 2021 season?
That is really difficult. I'll say they'll make the playoffs for now. I really need to see how they respond for the first couple games in the Big Ten, and then I'll give my national championship prediction. But right now, they're going to make the playoffs, and it'd probably be between them and Clemson, as Sam said, but really close between those two teams. I'm not ready to make a prediction just yet.
Yeah, and that is going to be a battle of the beasts. I think it'll come down to Ohio State and Clemson in the championship, and we're going to see an epic rematch. I'm predicting Ohio State will actually overwhelm Clemson this time and really, really surprise people with what they can do with another year of Justin Fields. Man,
Yeah.
things are looking good here, Sam. We got Trey Sermon coming to Ohio State, and then Seth Towns from the Ivy Leagues, best graduates transfer on the market, man.
Yeah, also, it looks like you're repping Clemson over there with that orange shirt. I can't see the rest of it.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is a Syracuse shirt here. I visited my boy Brian Gatumbi back in November. Thought I'd bring some good memorabilia from that
And then
trip.
also, the other thing is Clemson is going to have a tough Ohio State to face. You could have Justin Fields, who most people think is the number 2 behind number 1, Trevor Lawrence. So Fields trying to prove something. And then you could have a team in Ohio State who got burned last season by a Clemson in that playoff game that a lot of people think Ohio State should have won. So a lot of motivation on the line there if they face in the national championship.
And I just wanted to point out one more thing for you, Sam. I know it's a Syracuse shirt, but it's okay because they hate Clemson too.
Yep, very true.
Hey, Steven,
Yeah.
before we continue on with our next topic, I just want to say one thing about this whole transfer portal thing. I am holding out hope that Clay Helton foolishly decides to start JT Daniels next season so my guy Keaton Slovis can transfer to Michigan. I am holding out.
Oh, stop
so
it
much
with
hope,
Keaton
man.
Slovis. Come on, man. Stop it with
Hey,
that.
Michigan needs a quarterback, dude.
All right. Well, we
Well,
talked a
hold
lot
on.
about.
Isaiah reminded me of a point I wanted to make. Steven, you're talking of how this will only help the top teams in the league and how this transfer portal won't be good for parity. This is a league, college football that is, that had Alabama Clemson basically in the national championship game for an eternity. And if it wasn't for this transfer portal rule, Joe Burrow wouldn't be at LSU. And like Sam said, LSU wouldn't have sniffed the playoffs. It would have just been Alabama Clemson again, most likely, if this transfer portal didn't exist. So I see this as an overall net benefit.
Yeah, and we could definitely make that point about it. I wanted to re-clarify my comments on the transfer portal. I think in theory, that's what it is that it's the top teams getting richer. We've seen it benefit Ohio State and Oklahoma so far, but it looks like in practice, it's actually been a good thing to Sam and Ryan's point because we got LSU essentially the championship there. We got Burrow to LSU, which created the downfall of Alabama and Clemson this season. But we've talked a whole lot about how this move was going to benefit Ohio State, and we talked a whole lot about Ohio State. What about Oklahoma, guys? Where do you see them being next season in the thick of things?
Oklahoma's always in the conversation, especially because they find a way to keep Lincoln Riley, and he doesn't end up going to the Dallas Cowboys. But, yeah, Oklahoma's always going to be in the conversation. I think they're probably going to be the same type of team that they are every year. They lose Jalen Hurts, but they're going to bring in another talented quarterback. You know, they got a ton of talent there at the quarterback position year in and year out. And, you know, Radier is really good, Spencer Radier. Defensively, they're never that good. Offensively, they're always good. They're going to put up a lot of points on the Big 12. They're going to roll through the Big 12. Texas is always going to be interesting. Tom Herman, you know, Sam Ehlinger, they're always feisty.
We're back.
Overall, Oklahoma should win the Big 12 yet again. And then, you know, they'll make the playoff or they'll lose a couple of games and they won't make the playoff. But either way, they're not winning a national title. We've seen Oklahoma really doesn't have it. They get bounced in the playoff even if they end up making it.
I'll get into that a little bit later because I got my own thoughts on Texas. Isaiah and Ryan, you got any thoughts on Oklahoma's outlook for this season?
I just completely agree with Sam. You know, they're a really great offensive team, but they just don't have the defense, and defense wins championships.
All right, Ryan.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma will win the Big 12 because I see Baylor taking a step back after this really sensational year they had. They'll probably go down to like 9-3 or 8-4. And then Texas has been back for like 5 years. So I'm not taking this version of Texas is back seriously. So they won't win the Big 12. Really, Oklahoma will make the playoffs unless the Pac-12 decides they want to send a team to the playoffs and like an Oregon or Utah finally goes to the conference championship game and finish the year with only one loss. So really the Big Ten, SEC, and ACC, because of Clemson, will make the playoffs. It all come down to which one of the Pac-12 or Big 12 champion is better. So we'll see if Oklahoma makes the playoffs, but they'll definitely win the Big 12.
Yeah, speaking of interesting college football teams, let's go over our college football teams that can really surprise next season, almost like a football version of the Cinderella watch here, Sam. For those who tune into buzzer beaters, I have my two teams as Texas. I know you guys weren't too high on them, but I think with Oklahoma losing Jalen Hurts and Trey Sermon, that offense is explosive, and the Big 12 will always remain the Big 12 in the principle that it's, you know, half the defense, double the offense. But I think Texas showed a lot of promise last season. They did a great job against Utah. If they bring that same, you know, physicality formula and they continue to run the offense they do with Sam Ehlinger, they've got a lot of promise. I think if there's any team out there that could prevent a two-team Big Ten playoffs, it would be Texas. Texas, I think, is going to win the Big 12. They're going to surprise a lot of people. They got so much offensive firepower. I'm excited for Texas. And I'll go over my next pick. I think Auburn. I think a lot of people gave a lot of unnecessary hate to Bo Nix in his first year starting as a true freshman. And I know he didn't do the best against Minnesota, but he showed some promise against Alabama and against LSU. He played really competitively in games with the top contenders. And I just see Auburn as that team that's pesky enough to stick around, get, the 2 marquee wins. And when you're in the SEC, you catch a couple of lucky breaks, you finish out as a 1 or 2 loss champion, you're going to get into the playoffs. And I think Auburn is one of those teams that can really make a run in the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily see any teams that are going to be dark horses and end up actually making the playoffs, but 2 teams that I think could, be dangerous and maybe have a bit of a better run than people think. Minnesota, number 1. I know you like that pick, Steven. Tanner Morgan played well last year. They don't play Ohio State this year. They don't play Penn State this year. They have a pretty weak schedule until, they have a couple tough road games. There's always good teams whether it's Iowa or Wisconsin or Nebraska, some of those squads, or Michigan, but they get a lot of those tougher games at home. Minnesota could make some noise, and PJ Fleck is a really good coach. I like him a lot. Then the other team is another Big Ten team, Nebraska, Scott Frost. They haven't lived up to the hype yet. He had a lot of success at UCF. So, he's starting to get into his career here at Nebraska. He needs to start showing some, winning football. So they play the last game of the year, Minnesota at Nebraska, the last game of the season on November 27th. Don't be shocked if it has some Big Ten implications. The West is always weaker than the East. We'll see if Minnesota or Nebraska can make a run at the Big Ten championship game. Not winning the Big Ten, but maybe getting to the Big Ten championship game. I know Wisconsin is usually in that game. We'll see what happens.
And I'm always down for a Minnesota-Ohio State matchup. For those guys don't know, I was actually born and raised in St. Paul, Minneapolis, Minnesota area. That's the team I really grew up with, the Golden Gophers. My mom worked for the university for about 15 years. They took the championship game I wanted away. Wisconsin sunk the boat, as Isaiah puts it. So I'm really looking forward to that. Minnesota and Nebraska, though, I love those picks over there. It's going to be an interesting division out there, Sam, because the Big Ten West has always lagged behind the East. And with Minnesota's schedule, you're right, they don't have to play in Ohio State or Penn State this season. So potentially this is a really, really good schedule and possibly a really good team that can go out there, surprise people, and maybe give Ohio State a run for its money in the Big Ten championship game. Not win the Big Ten, but one can dream, What about you, Ryan? You have any thoughts on your 2 Cinderella teams in college football?
I am going to go ahead and define Cinderella as a team that won't win their conference or make the playoffs, but will win their division and potentially be in the conference championship game. And my first pick is going to be a little nutty. I'm not going to lie. I am predicting that the Stanford Cardinals will make a run in the Pac-12 North and challenge the Oregon Ducks for that division spot. I know they just came off a terrible year, but if there's one thing in football that really, really, really matters, it is coaching. And Stanford and Coach Shaw, he's a fantastic coach. They have great coaching, and I don't see a program like Stanford being down for long. I know they went 3-6 in the conference last year, but look at the teams above them. Washington State, they lost their head coach. Washington had their coach resign. Oregon State isn't going to go 4-5 again, and I don't have much faith in the California Golden Bears being that successful. So outside of Oregon, I see this as a very weak division that's ripe for the picking. And I think Stanford can take advantage of that because if you keep in mind, a few years ago, Stanford had Oregon's number. They would beat them year in and year out when Oregon was the more dominant team by most aspects.
That's true.
So my first pick will be Stanford to, I'm not going to call them the outright favorites to win the Pac-12 North because that's still Oregon, but I definitely think they could challenge and be right there with Oregon. And then my second pick, I'm going to go with the North Carolina Tar Heels. And for many of the reasons, I say Stanford will make their resurgence, in that it comes down to coaching. Mac Brown is one of the best coaches we have in college football, and he's just now started to rebuild the organization. And I think the longer he's there, the more successful this program will be. And also, just look at the ACC Coastal Division. It is a joke in every sense of the words. Virginia Tech, Miami, Pittsburgh, Duke, and Georgia Tech. That is as laughable of a division as you could possibly have in the entirety of Power 5 college football. That division should go down to the AAC, because that's just how bad this division is. I actually think there's like 3 or 4 AAC teams that would have won this division last year. So,
well, that division
given that
has had
North
a
Carolina
different team win each year over the past 7 years.
That is a great point. So why not North Carolina? They won the division a couple years ago, so why not do it again with a really good head coach and just really weak opponents throughout the entirety of the year? So yes, North Carolina will win their division and have the honor of getting destroyed by Clemson in the ACC championship game.
Love it, Ryan. Love it. What about you, Isaiah?
You guys ready for the shocker of the century?
It's USC.
It's Michigan.
My number one team that I think will surprise is the New Mexico State Aggies. I think the Aggies go from 1-11
Get out of here.
12-0 and make the college football playoffs. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, my goodness.
My goodness.
Ryan, don't worry,
just
man. You're not
ruined
gonna,
everything.
You don't need to call the cops on me and get me drug tested. But yeah, my number one team is I'm gonna go with the USC Trojans. They've got, I think, the best quarterback in the Pac-12. I love this kid so much. He's got tremendous footwork, great arm. He's just so confident. Like, there's nothing that phases him, you know? I think that Keaton Slovis, mark this down right now, will be the number one pick when he comes out of for the NFL draft. Their offense is loaded. They've got 2 guys that are really electric, and Brew McCoy and Drake London coming in now to add to that highly explosive offense. They've got a new ferocious defensive coordinator in Todd Orlando. I mean, this guy, my gosh, he has so much energy. I mean, his defense gets so much better. And
why don't you just kiss him already, Isaiah? Keaton Slovis right there.
the Pac-12 is just wide open. Like, look at all the teams right now in the Pac-12. Washington State, they just lost their head coach. By the way, I love Nick Rolovich, their new head coach. They lost their quarterback to the NFL draft. Washington, their coach retired. They have a new coach. They're going to have a new quarterback. UCLA, I don't see them doing anything. Stanford, they lost their quarterback in KJ Costello. Oregon State, like Ryan says, I don't think they're going to do anything. Oregon, they lost their quarterback in Justin Herbert. He's going to the NFL draft. Colorado, Mel Tucker's gone. They were bad anyways last year. Cal, Arizona State, Arizona, I don't really see that much from them. I just think that USC is going to surprise a lot of people. I know they've got a really hard schedule, but I just think Keaton Slovis will put the team on his back and lead them to the college football playoffs.
All right.
And,
what about team number 2?
Yeah, so my second team is not that drastic as USC making the playoffs. I'm going to go with Mississippi State. You know, Mississippi State, their defense was really good last year. It's just that their offense stunk up the joint. But they've got a new coach in Mike Leach who's going to they're going to throw the ball a lot down the field. They've got a good quarterback coming in KJ Costello from Stanford. They're not going to win their division, but I could see them winning at least 8 to 9 games.
I'll have to add one thing. I know your pick of USC makes sense in a lot of aspects, given how they have an explosive offense and they do have a really good quarterback. You overhype him to no end, but he is still a good quarterback. But I would say all this is being held back by a head coach who I'm pretty sure my hometown college team, the Marietta Pioneers Division III team, had a better recruiting class than USC had. So I would say that their head coach will hold them back, and they'll finish 8-4 again, or like 9-3 this year. They won't win the conference or even come close to winning the conference.
Ryan, I hope you're right, because you know how much I've been wanting Clay Helton gone. But as much as I hate to say this, I just think Clay Helton, he's going to lead USC to the playoffs this season. And it's just going to, man, it's going to make me miserable. That's all I'll say. But hey, before we end this, I just want to, what's your guys' take on Keaton Slovis? Like, I really want to get your guys' opinions on him.
I like winning quarterbacks, so until he wins consistently, I don't want to look at him.
Yeah, I feel the same way about that Sam feels about him. I think he's a talented quarterback, but let's see him win some big games out there and not absolutely melt down against the competition like your other guy, Jared Goff, did against Utah a couple years ago. You know, they might be great NFL quarterbacks one day, but we're talking about college. We're talking about here and now. And I just want to wrap up by saying that you know, both me and Isaiah picked a team in the SEC to potentially upset that conference and make a run at it. And that's the way I see this as the year that the Big Ten really surpasses the SEC in terms of quality of teams, in terms of quality of competition, and in terms of the conference with the best chance to put two teams through to the playoffs. If Texas does not live up to my prediction and win the Big 12, I don't see any other team making a run to prevent two Big Ten teams in the playoffs. I think this could be the year we see Penn State and Ohio State, or Ohio State and Wisconsin.
But I just want to add quickly to Isaiah's point about Keaton Slovis. I think he's a talented quarterback. He isn't a proven winner like Sam and you said, Steven, but I think he has enough arm talent to be drafted in the first round. Heck, if Daniel Jones can go 6th overall, Keaton Slovis can go in the first round. So I won't doubt that for a second.
Yeah, no doubt. But that's going to do it for us here over at Quarantine Chats. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, Steven, before you continue, tell them the announcement that I've been wanting you to tell them about.
Which one?
The YouTube channel.
Oh, that's right. We do have a Carpool Chats YouTube channel. So if you guys want to check that out, we've got current and previous episodes posted there on the daily. So just a little bit of archives. You could see how Isaiah and I are with our predictions. Most likely what you'll see is Isaiah is very erratic. You know, he's either completely missing the entire board or he's hitting the bullseye with his controversial takes. But anyway, that's going to do it for us here at Quarantine Chats. Thank you so much, Sam, for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you. I had a great time, guys. Hope to be on again soon.
Hey, tune into Buzzer Beaters on Tuesday with Sam, man. It's going to be an electric show.
And you know we're going to be sharing that to no end. So just watch out for your timelines, guys, because it's going to end up there one way or another on your newsfeed. Ryan, thanks for joining us from Fan Response. You're pretty much a regular of the show by now.
Oh, yeah, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I love coming on this show.
All right, good night, everybody.
See you guys.
Good night.